Imagine for a moment that Heavy Metal Foe's Electromite doesn't take just 2 Pendulum monsters, but takes 1 Metal Foe's monster and 1 Pendulum monster. Imagine for a moment that Isolde doesn't just take 2 Warrior monsters, but takes 1 Warrior and 1 Noble Knight monster. Imagine once more that Crystron Needle Fiber doesn't just take a tuner and a non-tuner, but requires one of those to be a Crystron monster. Now, this is what we did not get from Link Frames Pack 1. And if we look at the Link Frames Pack 1 cards, which, by the way, we haven't actually gotten all of them from the OCG imported into the TCG, but at least of the ones that we have, many of them are either really powerful or completely unplayable. Ones like Heavy Metal Foe's Electromite and Isolde are extremely versatile and played in a variety of different strategies, and both of them have seen a ton of competitive success. Obviously, Electromite is currently limited, and it's kind of a travesty that Isolde is not limited either, because that card is insane, or probably banned. Something should happen to that card, but anyway, those two cards are extremely generic and powerful, and I've seen play in a ton of strategies, while cards like the Inzektor Link that everyone immediately forgot about haven't even really seen experimentation in the Inzektor strategy, just because it's not very good even in that deck. Where Konami is fixing their mistakes, where Konami is owning up to their mistakes, is in the Link Frames Pack 2, which I know I haven't talked about on this channel. I don't know how many Yu-Gi-Oh channels you guys follow, so I don't actually know if you guys know the Link Frames Pack 2 exists, but it's currently slowly getting leaked out in the OCG. We kind of know a couple of the cards that are going to come out in it, and one of the things that I've personally noticed from the cards that have been out, especially the 6 Samurai Link monster, which we're going to talk about a lot in today's video, is that these cards are very clearly designed to not only be good in the archetypes that they're meant for, but be perfect in the archetypes that they're meant for. And what I mean by that is that things like the Inzektor Link are okay in their archetype, but they don't really change too much. They didn't take Inzektors from a terrible deck to a not terrible deck. Inzektors are pretty much the same, but one of the things that I've noticed of these new Link Frame Pack 2 cards is that they seem to really work well in the archetypes that they're meant for, and also it seems like they're only supposed to work in those archetypes. And when we take a look at the 6 Samurai Link monster, or really if you just look at any of the recent leaks from Link Frames Pack 2, you'll notice that they are clearly designed to only work in their archetype deck. So without further ado, let's take a look at the 6 Samurai Link monster. Huge shout out to Carlancho Store. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. They're from Peru. This is taken from their Facebook page. I did not make this graphic, but it looks really nice, so I'll be using it for this video. I'll even post a link to their Facebook page in the description below. Usually when cards are leaked, it seems like they're always posting these graphics, which is really nice. A lot easier than me just typing it out and putting it on the screen. Anyway, this card is called the Great General of the 6 Samurai, and this card is actually twofold, only meant to be used in the archetype. And from some of these cards, either they have one, they require you to use the archetype card to make it in the first place, or two, they have a generic summoning condition, but the actual effect only relates to the archetype. This card actually does both of those things. So it's a Link 2 monster with double downward pointing arrows, which is fantastic. That's what we want out of these types of cards, just like Isolde, just like Heavy Metal Foe's Electromite. It takes 2 warrior monsters, including a 6 samurai monster, so you have to be playing at the very least 1 6 samurai monster to make this card, although obviously if you've seen the effect, you can see that you need other 6 samurais to really get the full potential out of this card, because it says you can only use this card's 1 effect per turn, and that is if this card is link summoned, which prevents it from being abused. You can discard 1 card, add 1 card whose effect can place a Bushido counter from your deck to your hand. So I'm going to go over in a second what that can actually search out. There's basically 5 options. Some of the better ones are like Gateway of the 6 and the 6 Samurai United. And then the second effect is each time a 6 samurai monster is normal or special summon to a zone this card points to, place 1 Bushido counter on this card. And third, gains 100 attack for each Bushido counter on the field. So this card, like I said, it affects the 6 samurai deck in 2 ways. Not only can you only make this in a 6 samurai deck, but also all 3 of the effects only relate to Bushido counters, which are only used in cards that feature 6 samurais. For example, by far the best card this can search out, which is currently currently limited in the TCG is Gateway of the Six, which gets a ton of effects when you special summon or normal summon 6 samurai monsters that gives it more counters to just continue on your plays. And the key part about Gateway of the Six in combination with the card we just reviewed is that this card can remove Bushido counters from anywhere on the field to activate its effects, which really does combo nicely with that new 6 Samurai Link monster. You can also grab cards like Sheen's Dojo or 6 Samurai United, even things like Temple of the Six and Sheen's Daredevil. Now, maybe not all those cards are ridiculously powerful, and obviously I don't think it's good enough to play a card like 6 Strike Thunderblast, which at least with this first translation that we have of the card, you can't actually search 6 Strike Thunderblast because it doesn't actually place Bushido counters, it just removes them from the field. But anyway, there are several targets that you can add, but I really think the ones we're focusing on are Gateway of the Six and Sheen's Dojo, possibly 6 Samurai United. I'm not even sure, do 6 Samurai decks still play that card? I know that the combo-centric versions really focus on things like Sheen's Dojo and Gateway. I don't even know if they play 6 Samurai United though. I'm sure they do. It's probably still a good card. Drawing 2 for free is pretty good. But all these cards can now be searched in a 6 Samurai deck, and they are very powerful cards, especially when you have access to them, because Gateway of the Six is one of those cards that if it's at 3 copies per deck is way too insane, because having multiples on the field is just way too overpowering because you're getting double the counters that you normally would. But in the case of this new Link monster, if Gateway is still limited when it comes out, which I assume it will be, you can now have pretty much infinite copies of Gateway in terms of how many you actually open in your hand, because now any hand of a warrior monster doesn't even have to be a 6 Samurai monster. It can be something like Junk Forward or something along those lines, and then any 6 Samurai monster can make this new Link monster, and that's really awesome. But keep in mind, this isn't like Isolde, where that card, I mean, obviously it is good in Noble Knights. It might even be the most secure in Noble Knights. It seems like it's perfectly designed to work with the Noble Knight cards. However, because it's so generic, not only its summoning condition, but also the effect is generic. It doesn't require you to summon a Noble Knight. It doesn't require you to even send Noble Arms to the grave. It's just equip spells and warriors, super generic. Anyone can use it. It makes the card extremely abusable, which obviously a lot of people, including myself, have complained about for months now. It's also worth noting that this isn't the first time we're having this discussion. Maybe it's the first time on my channel that we're having a discussion, but this happened before and it will happen again. But with the case of like Mecha Phantom Beast Dracossack, a card that was ridiculously expensive and was a staple 3 of in the best deck of the format, people couldn't play that card in Mecha Phantom Beast if they were budget players, because the card was simply too good in other decks and it was too generic to make. It only took 2 level 7 monsters. It didn't require 1 Mecha Phantom Beast and 1 non-Mecha Phantom Beast, so Dragon Lords could make that card without playing any other main deck Mecha Phantom Beast monsters, which proved to be way too powerful. And there's always this debate, do you want cards to be generic? Things like all the Ice Barrier dragons as well, Trishul and Brionac, are those cards overpowered if you put them in just Ice Barrier decks, or are they too good when you put them in other decks? Obviously, because both those decks or both those cards have been on the ban list, they seem to be too good as generic cards, where something like Gungnir isn't as good and obviously hasn't seen as much play, simply because it takes a water monster, which is different from the other Ice Barrier dragons. That one change makes a huge difference, and I think Konami has realized that with the first Link Frames pack, that you don't have to make every single Link Frames pack card amazing in every single deck. You just need to make them good in the archetype that they're supposed to be good in, and I think most people wouldn't complain if that were the case. I mean, really, would people be complaining about cards like Isolde and Heavy Metal Foes Electromite if you were forced to play the actual archetype with those cards? Noble Knights just recently got a ton of fantastic support and have only seen mild regional success, even with Isolde at 3, and then if you took that card out of the game in terms of any generic uses of it, we wouldn't have decks like Gokis, we wouldn't have 1-card FTKs with Armageddon Knight. It makes a big difference, and from the perspective of a Noble Knight player, if Isolde eventually ends up getting banned, they're going to be pretty disappointed, because now they can't play that card even though they're playing the deck that it was designed for, and even though with that card in the deck it wasn't even really rogue potential, and now they don't even have access to it. I think that is very likely to happen, and I feel really bad for any of the Noble Knight players out there because of it. In conclusion, conclusion, I don't necessarily think that every single extra deck card for archetypes has to be unique to those archetypes, but I do think that Konami should be more careful when they decide which archetype extra deck boss monsters are generic and which ones aren't, because in the case of cards like Isolde and Heavy Metal Foes Electromite and Crystalline Needle Fiber, those cards just on paper seem way too powerful to be generic cards. I think in like games like Hearthstone, one of the ways that certain cards can be better than other cards is by the class restrictions, because in Hearthstone you have to only play one class and then you can play neutral cards and class cards. That means that the Blizzard company doesn't have to worry about players combining class cards with other class cards in the same way that I think Konami should really think about if certain boss monsters should be allowed to be generic, or at the very least should they force someone to at least play one monster from an archetype to actually main them. Because in the case of Crystalline Needle Fiber, there actually is a Crystalline tuner monster, I think it's a tuner monster, maybe it's the non-tuner monster, that is seeing play in a couple decks like Mermails right now and in the OCG, just in a variety of decks, and that's totally fine. I think that's cool. However, when you make a card like Glow Up Bulb and Link Karibo into a one-card Crystalline Needle Fiber, well, that might not be as fair. Anyway, though, hopefully you guys enjoyed today's discussion on Legacy support in Yu-Gi-Oh! Let me know what you think about Link Vrains Pack 2 so far, especially this new 6 Samurai monster. Is this the direction that you want to see Konami do, or do you want to see Konami make more cards that are generic, like Heavy Metal Foes Electromite, but just tone down their power level a little bit? I'll see you guys later, though. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.